us now on to our exciting panel. And I would like to introduce the panel that's going to be first led by Centennial College's Dr. Paula Demacio, Professor of Teaching and Learning in the Center for Organizational Learning and Teaching. So I'm going to turn it over to Paula. She's going to be introducing the panelists and moderating that session for you today. So Paula, you can go ahead.
Thank you so much, Gina. And I will start off by saying I am incredibly excited to be here. As Gina said, my name is Paula Demacio, and I'm very honored to be the moderator for this panel. Before I ask each of our incredible panelists to introduce themselves, I'll just take a minute or two to introduce myself and tell you a tiny bit about my formal and informal educational journeys, which will hopefully highlight why I'm so absolutely thrilled to be participating in this particular conference today. My formal educational journey focused entirely on science. My undergrad's in biology, my PhD's in molecular and medical genetics. And after working as a research associate at the Hospital for Sick Children, this formal education and experience led to be what would be a life-changing opportunity to teach in the biotechnology program at Centennial. Okay, so I love biotech, and I absolutely love teaching biotech. But little did I know that my interactions with hundreds, actually probably thousands of incredible biotech students and the many passionate educators at Centennial would spark a personal, powerful, and meaningful informal educational journey for me. Over my 18 years at Centennial, I've developed a personal passion to learn about, embrace, and promote equity, diversity, and inclusion in teaching and learning. In fact, in my current position at Centennial, I have the privilege of supporting other teachers as they strive to create meaningful, engaging, and inclusive learning environments for their students. So the focus of today's event being on equity, inclusion, and STEM truly represents a perfect intersection of my formal training in science and my personal passion and informal educational journey. Okay, so now I can't wait any further to introduce you to our dynamic panel. We have actually three incredible panelists today. One, I'll introduce her later. Unfortunately, she couldn't join us, but I'll hand it over first to Angela Wojtyla. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Angela Wojtyla. I am an electrical engineer. I'm on the board of the Ontario Society of Professional Engineers, and I chair one of our diversity and inclusion task forces. I also work for Microsoft as an enterprise channel manager. Both my organizations do a lot around EDI. Specifically, OSPE does conduct a lot of research. We advocate to the government on EDI issues and legislation. We implement intersectionality with a primary focus on the workplace. And we have also developed an application. It's called Diversify STEM, and you can actually download it. It's free off of Google Play and the App Store. And basically it's to help organizations leverage this application to share with their employees on and educate their employees on just various EDI topics. We also hold various forums and workshops just to help generate education awareness. We typically focus on mental health and leadership, but we also provide tools to our members to help them navigate their careers in STEM, but also their workplaces. I started Microsoft just over 6 months ago, so I'm still learning all about their EDI initiatives, but I've recently joined their Women at Microsoft Toronto chapter as co-chair, and they do have numerous employee resource groups. And one area that I'm really interested in learning more about of what they do is they really focus on inclusive design. So that's one thing I will be focusing on and learning a lot about in the next coming months. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angela. I'm really glad you're here, and I can't wait to hear more about what you're involved with. Thank you. Next, I will welcome Doina Oncel. Good morning, Doina.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Yes, so my name is Doina Oncel, and I am the founder and CEO, executive director. Let's just say I wear a lot of hats at VOLUTION, which is a nonprofit, actually a charitable organization that focuses on making STEM more inclusive. And what do I mean by that? Just a little bit of background. I actually am a social worker by training, and I have been someone that have been using the system, coming to Canada as a new immigrant, youth at risk, low income, having to navigate my way as a newcomer here. But then also I have worked with people that have been in the system as refugees, women, youth at risk, and youth in conflict with the law, and so on and so forth. And this is where, for me, I've learned that, STEM was something that I learned about by accident, by actually trying to develop some sort of a digital strategy for the nonprofit organization that I worked at, the last one, like more than 10 years ago. And this is where I learned about not having enough women in STEM. And for me, it was like a little bit confusing, because I mean, being someone that was new to Canada and trying to navigate my way here, as well as working with people with, facing a lot of barriers, I just said, like, I never knew about this. So I decided to create this organization just 7.5 years ago to make STEM more inclusive, especially women that come from diverse backgrounds, especially women that come with multiple barriers. And so there was a lot of trial and tribulation trying to figure out what to do and what would be the best way to go about it. And now we figure out a lot of our strategies basically have the voice of young women a lot of women are in post-secondary that join our committees, and they help us, they are the voice of what we do, and for all the programs that we do. But also we make our programs to be very inclusive of, women that come with multiple barriers. They get priority in our program. It's for them that are designed. We work with industry partners to make sure that they are supporting us and allowing us to show these young women what STEM actually is. As an example, we work with companies, and we do a lot of our programming in the normal times, not in the pandemic, but we do work inside a company. We have their staff to do to be the face of the educational piece, and so that way we'll get to inspire young women. We will also partner with post-secondary, the academic institutions. I don't have a better word for this, but it's an academic, like colleges, universities, so that way the young women that come into our programs, they get to have a feel of what it will be like, the college life, for example. So the women that come in our programs, we figure that high school age is a really important age. One, because we find that this is the time when a lot of young women try to figure out what they want to do in terms of future career. And this is a great opportunity for them to discover what that would be. And coming into our programs, they get to learn more about STEM. They get to meet women in STEM. They get to do a lot of education in a college or university, but also in a company where they could see, the future of what it might be. So yeah, that's, typically what we do, but also we have a lot of conversation internally about what are some of the gaps that we see. We like to see more more diverse women that not just come attend our programs, but more diverse women that come sit at the table. And for that reason, not only that we have young women that come and tell us about what is it that they need, but we try to bring as many women as possible of various backgrounds, to figure out where are some gaps and how can we make that, how can we make it more inclusive? Because we don't know what we don't know unless we actually bring people at the table. Yeah, in a nutshell, that's basically what we do. And I will thank you.
Oh, wonderful, Doina. Thank you so much for introducing yourself and getting us all excited to hear even more throughout the panel. Our third panelist, I'd like to welcome Vanessa Raponi. Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, Paula. Thank you so much. And Doina and Angela, it was great to hear your intros as well. So hi, my name is Vanessa Raquel Raponi. I am 26 years old, a Sri Lankan Italian Canadian, very openly queer, and grew up with some unique challenges that I'll probably mention at various points. But why I'm here today, I am the founder of EngiQueers Canada, which is a national not-for-profit for LGBTQ advocacy in engineering. And I started it just as a McMaster chapter in 2013, but it slowly over time grew to 31 schools in 9 provinces. So that was where I spent a lot of my undergraduate energy, was on traveling around the country and delivering inclusivity trainings, a lot of talks about intersectionality, really advocating for queer inclusion in a space where typically we exclusively talk about getting more women in STEM or more women in engineering, which was a really exciting movement. And these days, I've now been out of school for 2 years, and I am now a product development engineer. So I work on building toys, remote control trucks, and flying ferries. It is a very exciting role. My company Spin Master started Paw Patrol, so sorry not sorry to all the parents in the room. And yeah, it's been a wonderful journey over these last few years to get more involved in the EDI space, and to be, I always joke that the most radical thing I will ever do is simply exist as an engineer, even despite all the work I've done with EQ. So I actually just in the last couple weeks have also launched a YouTube channel, which I'm really excited about, where I'm kind of just making a vlog about life advice and stories from the perspective of a queer woman of color. And I'm really excited to be contributing more towards representation in media of more intersectional diversity. So really excited to be here today, and can't wait.
Wow. Thank you, Vanessa. Okay, I knew I was looking forward to this day when I woke up this morning, but after hearing those introductions, I'm even more excited for this panel. So thank you, Angela, Doina, and Vanessa. We regret that our other panelist, Deanna Burgart, was unable to join us today. Our team will be putting a link to her organization in the chat. I see it just appeared there. Please check it out. Her organization focuses on advancing Indigenous success in STEM. So please, take that URL and visit it when you get a chance. Okay, so before we get started with some questions for the panel, I'll just outline for all of you in attendance how the next 45 minutes will unfold. For the first 30 minutes, I will be facilitating the discussion and will invite each panelist to respond to certain questions I have. I'd love for it to turn into a really rich conversation. So to the panelists, if you'd like to respond or add to the dialogue of one of the other panelists, please feel free to do so. Don't just wait for me to, call your name. And to everyone in attendance today, if you have a question you would like to ask the panel, please put it in the Q&A. During the last 15 minutes of the this portion of today's event, those questions will be fed to me and I can ask the panel. Okay, so questions for the panel go in the Q&A. If you'd like to be part of the conversation and you have something to add, or you just want to, respond to something that's being said, use the Zoom chat feature for that, and we can have a really engaging back channel happening while the panel conversation is going on. Okay. So I guess we're going to get started now with some questions that I have, and I guess I'm going to take you right back to sort of the beginning of your journey, and I'd like to ask what sparked your interest in your STEM field or industry, and maybe we'll go back and we'll start with Angela for this one.
Yeah, so I actually owe it exclusively to my high school electronics teacher. In grade 10, I needed to fill a spare, and growing up, I always helped my father renovate all his rental properties, and I thought it'd be beneficial to learn the theory behind it. I naturally excelled in the class, and my teacher started talking to me about engineering. So all thanks to him, I actually decided to pursue a degree in electrical engineering, and the rest is history.
Incredible. Thank you so much. All right, how about you, Doina?
For me, as I mentioned, I'm not actually a woman in STEM, so I kind of got in it by accident. For me, it was more about to be honest with you, I feel like once I learned that there's not enough women in STEM, I feel like I missed so many opportunities for myself because I wasn't aware at my young age about what's out there. And I would have loved, you know, as a kid, I remember I used to take things apart. We had one cassette player. I grew up in Romania, in communist Romania, so then we didn't have much things. So we had this one cassette player, and I would take it apart and just to try to put it right back together. So if I would have been encouraged, I'm sure I probably would have been an engineer. I'm very curious by nature. So there were so many missed opportunities that I feel like I had, and also I've seen in my own children, my daughters that actually would have liked to get into something, you know, that nature, and I feel like it wasn't accessible. So that's why I decided to create this organization where everyone has access. Doesn't matter whether you can afford to pay it or not, where you look different, or you know, nobody in your family have been in STEM. You know, if that's what you want to do, this should be an option for you available. So that's how I got into it.
Thank you, Doina. And Vanessa?
Yeah, I think for me, you know, money was always a really big struggle growing up, and I was always seeking a career that would give me that financial independence. And with that spirit in mind, my mom, who was also a social worker, actually, she always encouraged me to take all the maths and sciences and really just kind of keep my options open. And when I honestly really discovered what engineering was in kind of early grade 12. I had never been to any like STEM camps or anything like that. And I just knew that chemistry and calculus were kind of my favorite subjects. And I liked that they were very black and white grading in comparison to more subjective classes like English. And I was like, how do you know this is an 81 and not an 83? So I was really excited to go into the field. And throughout university, I did a lot of co-op. I was in materials engineering, and it was when I worked at Pepsi, both foods and beverages manufacturing, actually in the plants, that I got kind of introduced to this world of industrial engineering and kind of manufacturing. And but I'm also a Toronto born and bred kid, so really wanted to be in the city downtown, kind of in my 20s and probably 30s. So trying to find a manufacturing facility in downtown Toronto is not the easiest thing to do, but I landed on Spin Master, which does manufacturing, but I work more on the product development design side, which is perfect for me, and it's a great collaborative teamwork space. As well as applying kind of some hard technical skills as well.
Oh, thank you, Vanessa. And, you know, just by listening to all three of you, it's certainly obvious that, you know, opportunity is key for young people entering STEM, having a mentor there, someone who will believe in you. And honestly, I even from my perspective, you never really know who's going to benefit from all of these initiatives we put out there. And Angela, does your high school electronics teacher know that you followed that route that he introduced you to?
Actually, he does. Funny enough, his son was in my engineering program, so he would always tell me about his dad, and it was really cool to just hear about his dad and what's happening there. And it was, I think he would always be proud, for sure.
Fabulous. All right, thanks. Okay, so I think I'm going to move on to the next question then that I have. I'm wondering what challenges or systemic barriers are important to address that could advance inclusion in the STEM fields. So maybe this time I'll mix it up a bit. There are really only three of you, so only so many ways I can mix it up. But Doina, let's start with you this time.
Okay, I have so many ideas here. I'm just gonna talk about an example that I've seen when I started VOLUTION. So coming from the non-STEM field, trying to bring STEM to everyone was a bit of a challenge for me. But one thing that I used to look for is to bring women in STEM to facilitate workshops. It was very important to me to bring the college model where you have people in the field to be teaching what they know in the field as it happens versus something that they studied many, many years ago. So when I was looking for women in STEM to be, to facilitate a fun math session or something about brains or something about science, I didn't think about anything except for I wanted a woman to be facilitating this. At that time, I would bring my daughter, my youngest daughter. She was 4.5 years old, and we had those sessions for 7 years and up. And so my kids, for people that don't know, my kids are mixed. So they are considered to be young Black women. And so I didn't think about anything but just bringing women to facilitate. Then I would bring women that look like me. It just kind of happened that way without even thinking. I guess my privilege was kind of blocking that to see other things. And I think it was the third or the fourth session where my youngest daughter mentioned, again, she was 4.5 and these sessions were designed for 7 years old and up. And I didn't think that she was even paying attention. But for her, she mentioned on our way home, and I was exhausted. And she said, Mom, I really appreciate, I feel like I'm learning a lot. I'm like, hey, this is nice. She says, I feel like I'm learning a lot. I like the sessions are very interacting and hands-on. But one thing I noticed is that the teachers that come and they teach me these things, they look like you. And I haven't seen anyone that looks like me. Is it because that people that look like me are not smart enough? And I think for about 20 minutes, I was mute and I couldn't move because I didn't realize, I didn't see that. And so from then on, for me, it was very important that when I even partner with companies or do anything, I want to make sure the representation is, it's apparent. It's seen. I want the young women that come to our programs, which we happen to have women of various backgrounds. That's intentional for me, but also intentional is to make sure that companies understand that when we bring young women in their companies, they need to be seen, they need to be represented. So that's, I think, one of the barriers that I see a lot. Another thing is in terms of funding, like money. People cannot really afford a lot of these programs, and a lot of the times when I work with companies, they give us a little bit of money, and we create a program and we bring these young women and we provide it for them at no cost. But something that I guess this is where my social work had come, when I put that on, is that yes, just because the program is free, it also does not mean that it's accessible, because one, do they have the money to get to where, to pay for transportation? How far is it from where they live in order for them to get to that program? We do have, I have to say that for now, the pandemic has been a blessing in disguise because we're able to provide our programs to young women virtually, where before they would have to travel probably about 2 hours one way to get to the program, and then 2 hours back. And then, it's something that I didn't even know until I figure out that that's just what they need to do. One other barrier is that something that is so simple, and we think in here in Canada that it's, we take it for granted. We had, for example, in one of our programs, we had 30 young women and 20 of them needed a laptop. They don't have laptops. Or now that we do stuff virtually, access to internet. Before we provided laptops to young women, but do they have internet at home to actually access, especially now with the virtual world that's happening? So how do we navigate that? How do we put, together a program that is accessible? Because access, it doesn't just mean you can afford to pay for it. Access means, can you get there? Access means you have internet, do you have a device to help you? So those are the barriers that I see. And as well as see it, you can be what you can see. So that's also very important.
Thank you, Doina. Vanessa or Angela, do either one of you want to follow up on what Doina has started here?
Yeah, for sure. I think that for me, one of the biggest reflections I have on the barriers is just that oh, can you hear me?
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
No, yes.
Okay. If you've ever seen one of those graphics where it's kind of like a woman starting like 100-meter dash, like 50 meters back from somebody else. So I think there's just more things that are kind of facing underrepresented and underprivileged groups. Like I know in my case, like in addition to completing my engineering program, which had the full course load and the full, you know, tumultuousness that is engineering, like I was going through coming to terms with experiences I had as a child related to child sexual abuse. And throughout my undergraduate degree, I came to terms with what happened. I started therapy for the first time. I confronted my mom and my stepfather. I went to a court case against my stepfather. He pled guilty. Like I had all this going on in the background of still going to engineering school. And I think that, you know, so that I had one semester where I failed a bunch of classes and I didn't have the mental energy. I was very depressed and had really high anxiety. And I needed to take 8 months off or over a year off to go do internship and kind of recuperate and focus on my mental health and physical health. And I think that these are the types of things, whether exactly or in, you know, maybe you have a child while you're going through school, or maybe, you know, to Doina's point about, you know, like struggling with representation, you just have imposter syndrome. There are things that you're just kind of going through in addition. And that's where I think like really leaning on community and knowing that you're not alone throughout these things is super, super helpful, because it just helps you feel more a part of something greater. So whether it's women in engineering groups or EngiQueers groups, whatever it is during school, as well as, you know, attending conferences and just recognizing that while it does suck that you have to go through all these extra things that your colleagues don't have to, it also helps you realize you have unique skill sets and you're resilient and you're facing, you know, the weight of the world on your shoulders and you're still going forward. So I think that that is at least something that really kept me going, and I'm sure will help keep others going as well.
Yeah, and I'd like to add on to Vanessa's pieces. Like from OSPE, we actually did research behind one of like the 3 top barriers. And we actually found pay equity was a big one in the workplace. Typically, we focus on gender wage gaps, but when we actually introduced the intersectionality lens, we realized that actually women of color are impacted even further when it comes to the pay equity piece. Also, workplace culture is a big one. So typically underrepresented individuals feel disrespected, devalued, and also just lack that sense of belonging. And then the third aspect is the lack of having those mentors and those sponsors and role models. I know from my experience, I came to Toronto, I started my first job working for Hydro One in the field. It was myself and 80 men in a crew, and I was just yearning to meet just another female that I could even talk to. And I reached out to our HR department and I'm like, oh, do you guys have any types of networks that I can join just to meet somebody even like my own age? And they didn't have anything like that. So 10 years ago, actually, I started Hydro One's first diversity and inclusion initiative. There was nothing like it, but I just wanted to help bridge that gap between the field and our head office and just start that community. And for me, this is when I really realized how much it empowers people and truly can make such a difference and change that workplace culture in a positive manner and help everyone enjoy the workplace. So for sure, thanks.
Wow. Okay, so you've started some incredible conversation here, and there's some comments in the chat as well. I'm wondering whether, and just as somebody listening, what for the people in attendance today, you know, what can we do to address some of these barriers that you have so eloquently outlined? You know, I wonder if you could think of just one practical thing that all of us can do. Obviously, it's an amazing first, well, it doesn't even have to be a first step, but it's amazing that we're all here talking about it, right? That's so important. But what can we do to start to address some of these barriers?
I can begin. I think for me, one thing that I've realized recently is the education and awareness piece on just EDI topics in general are so critical, especially I think when people maybe not in these underrepresented groups, when these topics come up, they're unfamiliar to them and they shy away from these topics. So it's harder for them to know what language to use, and we do need champions. So for us to educate people on just the various topics and even how to approach the topics and how to be champions and how to just start these initiatives, I think that is critical for sure.
Thanks, Angela. Vanessa or Doina?
Yeah, I think that as I mentioned earlier, I truly feel the most radical thing I'll ever do is just be an engineer. So I think just really trying your best to stick it out and help be that representation for the future if you are a member of one of these marginalized communities. And I think another thing is to help. There's always going to be somebody going through advice and use your help. So always trying to be a mentor to others is, I think, so critical. And, you know, all three of us have started organizations. You don't necessarily need to go quite to that level, but it could be just joining one of these organizations and finding other people who are seeking assistance, because, you know, again, it just comes down to me for that, trying to avoid that feeling of thinking you're all alone, because I think that is just what really causes a lot of negativity mentally. So as long as we can all help contribute to that, I think that that's a huge one.
Thanks, Vanessa. And Doina, I have to say that your comment about you know, just because it's free doesn't mean it's accessible, really resonated with me. I know some people were commenting on it in the chat as well. And it could be anywhere from individual barriers of tech, like you mentioned, to some of the mental health issues that Vanessa touched on. So do you have any advice for us as to what we can do to try to make those opportunities more accessible?
Listen to me. I think it's more, well, and I'm saying this as a joke, but also I am kind of serious because I do talk to the young women. I mean, I am very involved in, I would say, in their lives, because I mean, I like to take the approach when I do outreach. It's not just about, this is a program where you have access to learn about, you know, how to code and how to build an app, or learn more about business development, or whatever the case may be. This is more, what are other things that are happening with you? What, you know, in the social work industry, we check the room temperature. How are you feeling? What are some of the barriers that you have at home that you know, are you going through a mental health issue? So I do a lot of counseling, I would say, on the sideline with the young women, so they feel I have the so-called open door policy. Talk to me about anything so that I know what's going on. If you don't show up for a program, you know, I check in and see what, you know, what's going on. You know, is it because you don't have the money to pay for transportation, or is it because you're going through something that, you know, you don't have food at home? And when I work with companies, you know, I remember back in the day, I had a meeting with this company, and we're talking, and I speak from, this is what I do, so I can't, you know, this is the examples that I could give. But as an example, you know, this company will say, we'd love to work with you because we love who you work with. But when they come here, we like them to have a dress code. And I just looked at her and I said, we can't work together. I'm sorry, this is not going to happen. Because these young women, they probably have one pair of jeans, flip-flops they wear in the summer. They're not going to have business casual clothing unless you are going to provide that for them, if that's what you need, right? So it's the advice that I could give to, I wouldn't say the education, because I feel like a lot of colleges, universities are very well aware of what's happening in terms of, the diversity and inclusion and barriers, that are out there. But I mean, in terms of the workforce, especially starting in the workforce, not all women are going to show up with that, the dress code, and be cognizant of that. It's actually a very important step one, and knowing that people come with so many other things that they go through in their life, raising by their single mothers, especially now with the pandemic. We've had young women that were raised by the single mothers, and their mom is a nurse, and she had to be at the hospital. So they had to go through this mental, like, for them to be present in the program, they were thinking about, is my mom going to be sick when she's coming home? It's such a huge thing that is happening right now. So there's so many factors that are happening in people's lives, and we need to be aware of that and be cognizant and be willing to listen, because sometimes a lot of these young women, what they need, they don't want you to solve their problems. They just want you to listen. They want to be heard, and they want to be acknowledged that this is happening. And if you can provide something, fine. But if you just listen, I think it's one of the most important things that you can do for them.
Thank you, Doina. I agree, and I see Vanessa and Angela nodding, and I'm sure all the attendees are also nodding along with you. So thank you for that. I know all three of you really touched on this in your introductions, but I'm going to give you the opportunity to expand on what inspired you to become a leader in advancing EDI in your industry.
Yeah, I think for me, I've always felt that I've been in a privileged position when it comes to specifically my queerness. I grew up in Toronto, where I was like a flower girl at a gay wedding when I was 8 years old, and I needed to be taught that some people don't like queer people and that like they experience hate. Like, it was such a foreign concept to me growing up because I was so surrounded by queer people. And I think like my family's always been very accepting. I've always had really great allies, even if they were cis straight white men, were still allies to me as a queer woman. So I think that really made me feel empowered to help others experience the same thing that I was experiencing and feeling that sense of belonging and welcoming. So EngiQueers really just started as me wanting to kind of find, similar to Angela, just wanting to find other people like me within McMaster Engineering. And, at the time, we could probably count on one hand the number of openly queer people in the space out of the 4,000 students. But then over time, as we started, people started asking us for, can you teach us about the language of sexuality? Can you teach us about systems of oppression and intersectionality? And once we started being less kind of internal of helping our own community just with social connection or professional development, once we started with that external kind of education and advocacy piece, that's when we started kind of going to conferences and speaking more, and more people really wanted that organization as well. So as it grew over time, I think it just became clear that what we were doing was a little bit different, and what we were doing was needed. And people EQ just really needs to be present at any given school to just help make a statement that if you are queer, you are welcome here, and the faculty supports you, the engineering society supports you, and whether we have a few events or we do trainings, like, we're just here to help you feel like a part of it all. And I think that for me personally, it was always just the fact that I know there's so many queer people who are rejected from their families, they have to hide, there's religious concerns. So I think that being able to be that voice and just spread the kind of spirit of what the queer community is all about just has really hopefully helped others as well.
Thank
Yeah,
you, Vanessa.
I'd like to add on. From my perspective, really it started when I started working at Hydro One and I created that network. It just really showed me that people just need that empowerment to actually just be able to progress in their careers and just have that network. And I think as I progressed in my own career and started to be asked to be a mentor myself, I realized that there were so many people, I don't know why this comes about, but when everyone graduates, they're so obsessed with making the right choice and making that right decision because they think that one decision will be this like the right thing to, like the only thing that they can actually do, and it'll like impact the rest of their lives. But as I continue to mentor that, it really just helped me even learn from them just the different aspects of what people struggle with, and just through the various networks that I've been involved in, it's just that's one thing that I've just loved to just help and help them realize that one decision, it changes. Like even when I look at my own career, I started in energy, then I went into telecom, then I went into banking. Like it's okay, like life, as long like life evolves and you'll be able to continue and make changes, and it's all a learning opportunity. So I think it's just, I think people just need to just not stress so much.
Thank you for that, Angela. And you know, that's not just a reminder for the young people coming out of school, it's really a reminder for all of us, no matter what stage we are in our careers. Thank you.
I could actually share, for me, like I mentioned, I come from a social work background, so I've worked with women. As a kid, I've always wanted to be a teacher or a lawyer. I've always had this passion. I feel like, you know, growing up in communist Romania, I've seen women being really second class. And I really mean that. They were like second class. They were, it was such a, you know, the powerful dynamic between men and women. Men made all the decisions, even though women had education, even though women had degrees, they were still their husbands or their fathers that would make the ultimate life decisions. And I feel like that's just not gonna be me. So I came to Canada and I felt like I'm hearing all these messages about how women, you know, I've also experienced domestic violence, I experienced homelessness, I experienced a lot of barriers of my own. And so I didn't have time to think about, I wanted to be a teacher or lawyer. I did ended up working with kids for a bit. And I loved how curious they are, their minds, you know, they just want to, when you see someone when they're 7 years old and they see something for the first time, and it's just like, you look at their face and I want to go back, I want to be a kid so I can see the same thing. It's so exciting. But also seeing the injustice for women. And to be honest, when being in Canada and seeing all the barriers that women are still facing here, even though Canada is so much more advanced than Romania is. And so, you know, when I, just by accident, I learned about women in STEM. And one the things that got me, I always share stories, is I wanted to learn more about technology and how can it actually change a corporation, either nonprofit or for-profit. Digital, it was, you know, this is about 12 years ago, when it was relatively new for the rest of us that were not in technology. And so I learned about building a website, and I taught myself a little bit of coding, HTML and CSS, so I can help this nonprofit that was at to build a website for them, because my job was to fundraise, to bring money for their programs. And after building a website and building a little bit of a social media presence, there was funding coming in. There was higher enrollment in programs. People knew more about this organization and there was more awareness. So I saw the benefits. And then I decided to open my own company because of course, why wouldn't I? So I opened my own company in digital media, and then learning more about WordPress. WordPress was such a new thing back then, like 10 years, 11 years ago. And so I would go to any workshop that I could get my hands on to teach me how to build websites on WordPress. And so that's why I realized there's like 35 to 40 people in the room, 3 to 4 people, myself included, are women. my thing was like, I paid for this workshop. I want to learn so that as an entrepreneur, if I pay for this knowledge needs to pay my bills for the month. So my hand was up all the time, asking so many questions. And then I saw women, the 3 to 4 women that were there, they were coming to me, asking me to ask questions on their behalf. And I was a bit confused because, first of all, I didn't know what they mean. They're using this language. I'm like, first of all, can you translate that? Because I don't even know what I'm asking. But I decided to have a conversation with them after the workshop is done. And that's why I learned that women that have been in technology field for decades, you know, they will get comments at work. So I mean, different women, different workshops, stories were so similar. This is the only job I've always had, like since, I don't know, 15, 20 years. I've been working in IT and technology. And I feel like I don't get the support that I need so that I can ask questions. I'm kind of shocked to see you coming in with your hands up all the time, because if I do that at work, I get comments like, maybe I should have married a rich husband. Maybe I should have been a better mother. Maybe I should have known how to cook better, or, you know, how to be a better wife or things like that. Then I wouldn't have to work. And so for me, I just thought this only happens in Romania. This doesn't really happen in Canada. And when I learned that, I was really furious. And that's why I got more curious to learn more about, you know, STEM. And the thing that got me, that was my, you know, I had the imposter syndrome for a year and a half. I had this idea in my head that we should have an organization. You know, when you get this great idea, say somebody should be doing this, somebody should be creating that, somebody should be building this, but you never think is you. And that was me, and thinking like somebody should create this organization where you can create opportunities for all women to come and learn, you know, as a younger age. And then once you're in the workforce, there wouldn't be this, it wouldn't be so shocking that you're a woman and you go to work and you are so male-dominated industry. So, you know, I had this idea in my head for about a year and a half. And I remember I went to a conference, and this conference was that this is it, I'm doing this. I'm at the conference, they were talking about diversity and inclusion for women in STEM. And there was 4 middle-aged white men on a panel. No women in the panel, not even one woman, not even a woman of color, nothing, just 4 white men talking about if there's nothing stopping women from going into STEM. If they want to get into STEM, they should just do it. It's not that hard. Oh my God, I just went to my then mentor's office. I remember I was so angry. I took my bag and I threw it on his couch there in the office. And I said, I hate this. And I said, that was the first time when I actually said this out loud. Like, somebody should be doing this. And he just sat me down, like, calm me down. It's like, why don't you do it? And I said, I'm not a woman in STEM. So I think a woman in STEM should be doing this. And he said, well, actually, you kind of are, because you have a company that builds websites and you taught yourself how to code, but it doesn't really mean that you're not really in STEM. You're in technology. So, and also you understand what it's like to have barriers and not have access to these things. So this, therefore, you're the best person to do this. 6 months later, her VOLUTION was born. That's my story.
Incredible, Doina. Thank you for sharing that story with us. Incredible. Vanessa, I saw you, you know, responding to a bunch of what Doina was saying. Do you want to jump in with anything?
No, I think it's just, yeah, those panels are always infuriating when there's a bunch of men talking about women's issues or the like.
It's interesting because when I kicked off my first initiative at Hydra One, I had to get that male, or an executive sponsor, and it was when we launched it. It was I love the term he used. He referenced himself as stale, male, and pale, and he's like, we need to change this. And I love that. When I heard that, I'm like, that's so true.
Yeah.
I love that too. Okay, so I'd like to move on to like the advice part of this panel. So I'm going to ask you what advice do you have for students, particularly those from marginalized communities who hope to pursue careers in STEM? And then I'm going to ask you about advice for faculty. So let's start out with advice for students.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is try to work hard in school, do your best to you know, you need to prioritize actually, you know, the coursework and being present and participating, because that'll help you be a good professional as well if you understand the content. And then to really just lean into those communities that we've mentioned, whether it's committees or teams or clubs, they're really going to help you go a long way. And in the time of COVID, I mean, I think it's a really unique challenge, but to just do your best to still speak up and hunt out opportunities, because the more that you can kind of soak up the university experience, I think the better.
I think, and reiterate, getting involved is just joining those networks. These will help empower you and also just support you throughout your journey throughout school, but also afterwards. And getting a mentor, I think internally or externally, this is key. I think this also helps you navigate the various barriers that you will have to overcome throughout your career. And they are a great support system. And over time, as you continue your relationship with a mentor, they will be able to get to know you, and they'll be able to speak to your work accomplishments. And in due time, they'll actually become your sponsors. So this is a big critical part to help you excel in your own career.
Incredible, Angela. Thank you. And Doina?
Yeah, the young women that I just speak for women because this is who I have the programs for, but you know, really honestly, be curious and ask yourself the question, why not me? You know, why not me? Why can't I be here? You know, you have the right to education just as everybody has. And just because you are in an environment where not everybody looks like you, it doesn't mean that you don't have the right to be there. Maybe you can open doors for many young women after you to be, you know, to change the landscape, to change what it all looks like. Maybe you are that person that was meant to change it all, to open doors for opportunities for many young women that might be looking up to you. No pressure there, but yeah.
Great. Well, thank you. Okay, so let's move on now to faculty. What can we as faculty do to prepare our students from diverse backgrounds to enter the STEM industries?
Yeah, I think that faculty needs to stay connected with these conversations, make sure they're engaged with the latest trends, what's going on, because things progress very quickly in this space. For example, if you're a faculty member who's exclusively talking about women in engineering, you're kind of missing the mark of where we're at these days, and you might be actively dissuading women with other intersections from feeling included. And I think that just kind of also to sort of address one of the questions mentioned in a Q&A about having marginalized communities coming forward to the mic, but then having to do all the work. So if you're a faculty member who is a person of color, a woman of color, what have you, and feels passionate about this, to really manage not becoming kind of the go-to for all the labor related to fixing these issues, and not becoming the person who has to answer every question and do every single thing. And I notice, like, what I do in these situations is often explicitly ask, like we made that joke earlier about there being exclusively men in a conversation about women, which is a problem, but equally if there's exclusively women and no men, then now we're doing the opposite and just making the women do all the work. So I think you need to kind of also challenge, like, is there equality and equal representation in these organizations? Like, if you're seeing a perfectly diverse space, but the reflection of your organization is 80% male, then, you know, you're doing a disservice by putting all the work onto those folks. So I would encourage faculty to speak out about this and challenge that and ask, you know, how can we engage more XYZ to make this a more inclusive space?
And I'd like to add on to that.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Angela.
I think also just educating students on potential barriers. I think it is this way it'll also help them navigate just everyday life and their workplaces. And then this way they'll be able to anticipate going into some of these situations and better prepare for some things that may go wrong and get through that together.
And if I can add to that, I'm going back to the younger generation, but I think it includes these young women in the conversation when you try to create some sort of a change or even opportunities for them, because it's hard to, if you don't have that life, you know, it's hard to know what's going on and how to make it better. So include, you know, I think that's part of a lot of people talk about diversity, but not everyone like talks about being inclusive and what does that look like. So I think including these students in the conversation, what do you need? Because you don't know what to create unless you actually start at the root of the problem. And how can we make that, you know, easier and accessible and easier for you? And then what do you need in terms of, or maybe if they're looking for a mentor, how do we find a mentor for you? You know, what are some ways that we can do to find that for you? Because you know, it's nice to have a mentor, but sometimes young women, and I speak from the young women because they're still in high school, and sometimes they don't even know. Like last year we had a program, and instead of they have a mentor after we finished with the program, and most of them didn't sign up because they thought it was another program and they have to produce some sort of you know, like it's a work that they have to do. And I said, no, this is a support system. So some of them don't even know what a mentor actually should be doing, right? So it's like having that conversation and educate them about what that is and give them that opportunity. So, but I think it all starts with figuring out what do you need? Where are you now? And how can we meet you there and bring you to where you need to go? That would be my advice.
Well, thanks to all three of you. I think I'm going to move this panel section now on to the amazing questions that have been coming in from everybody else. And I'm going to start with a question that really just feeds off of what Doina was just saying about finding a mentor. So maybe you can address, how do you suggest getting or finding a good female mentor?
I would recommend just talking to them. Like if somebody inspires you, just send them a message, send them a note, and really focus on being authentic. Like you don't want to be like, hello, Madam so-and-so, my name is this, and I'm interested in a mentor. Like you want to be more like, think of it more as of a conversation, and you want to kind of warm up to the mentor side. Because I think that if you know, maybe sometimes like if there are formalized mentorship programs at your work or whatever, like you can go down that route. But sometimes you might just start with like questions or a coffee chat. And I find like if you just kind of reach out to somebody you trust periodically and talk to them about a challenge you're facing, like over time, that can lead to a really great mentorship.
Yeah, and I think that also just approaching it in an informal manner. Like I think that it doesn't have to be a structure, don't make it too complicated, and also leverage the people in your life. So even if they may potentially know somebody in their network and that person inspires you, don't be afraid to ask them to introduce you to that person. So that's another opportunity.
Yeah, I think using LinkedIn would be a really good way to start. Just reach out to people on LinkedIn. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to be very formal. Like, would you be my mentor? It's like, I have some questions and I'm really confused about this. And I see you as the expert, and would you be able to just answer this question? And not everything has to be so formalized. There are mentorship programs out there that you have to meet, you know, once a month or whatever the case may be. But if you just do it on your own, just reach out as you need to and just make it clear. I'm just looking for advice. I'm looking, and I don't know, you know, I don't have anyone in my life that can help me with this. Would you be able to? And don't put too much pressure or even on the mentor, because some people might want to help, but you don't know what's happening on there. And as well, you know, they have a really demanding job and they may not have the time. It doesn't mean that they don't want to help you. They really cannot because of whatever various reasons. So that's why I don't put that pressure and just make it informal and just say, ask questions, and, you know, and don't be afraid to ask, you know, questions as like, you know, can you help me with, I need advice on this, but also I really want to land this job, and I don't even know how to go about it. What are some questions I would ask? And I think LinkedIn is a really good resource. And there's also another one called 10,000 Coffees. If you go 10,000coffees.com and you just create an account and reach out to people, and that's what they sign up for, to have a coffee with you and answer questions.
I think one aspect that I'd like to add, one mentor that I had, she was in upper management, very limited time, and she actually had this red phone system. So if I was like in a predicament where I had to negotiate a salary or something that was like a big deal, then I would quickly send her a message and she'd jump on a call. So it was like just like really important decisions that I had to make that I could speak with her about.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to move on to another question from the audience. How has COVID presented new opportunities to strengthen EDI in STEM?
I think it's been the great equalizer, working from home. I was on this one call where there were 3 young men with babies attached to them. And I was like, man, you just don't see that like very often. It's always like you talk about the mother, but you so rarely see like the father side so openly. So I think that it's just helped everyone recognize that everyone is dealing with various family things and different situations happening at home. And I think it's when talking about the importance of EDI. And I would also note, like, with everything going on politically and in the world, like, if you are trying to say in 2020 that racial issues don't exist, like, you're not paying attention. So I think that it's gotten to the point that, like, most organizations, I think, tried to at least do something, whether acknowledging publicly or internally, with everything happening with Black Lives Matter and the like. So I think that that's really expanded and given better justification. Like, when you can point to 1,000 news articles that came out yesterday, it kind of helps if your justification right now to be like, we need to care about this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've even noticed at my workplace, like, just a lot of these topics that they're just front and center. So everyone's talking about it, everyone's bringing it up, everything happening on the news. I think it's been a really great opportunity to just talk about it. And I think just because we are in our homes doing these virtual calls, people are, I think, just opening up a little bit more. And because obviously you see kind of what's in the background and people are running around. So people just start to kind of put their own barriers down to actually open up.
For me, I think COVID has brought a awareness to different types of challenges. I mean, and again, I'm bringing what I do at VOLUTION, working with young women that don't even have internet, like proper internet at home. So it's like, that's another challenge. How do they access any virtual learning? You know, what does that look like for them? And not only that, but also is like, is their home, their environment set up for home learning? You know, some people might live in a small place. So I think COVID has actually opened up to, like, for us to understand certain issues that actually happen at home. And sometimes we might be able to see that firsthand, having able to see it through the virtual camera. But it's also realizing that some people can't show up because their situation at home is not ideal for virtual learning. Doing something in person was actually better because that was an escape for them to get away from their reality for a day and be in an environment that was actually set up for learning. So that's one thing that I find that, you know, I don't want to be the negative person here, but I just think it's just that for me, that's what I've seen. It just, you know, it did help us unite us. I feel in the positive, there's access now. You can have a program that is happening in Toronto and people from across the world can access it. So that's the positive. But for some people, there might still be challenges.
Okay, so right now I have 3 more questions in the Q&A that I really want to get through all of them.
Okay.
So we're going to start with a question that Vanessa, you've already touched on a tiny bit, but can you speak to the tension that exists between giving marginalized people the mic to speak our own truth in industry and expecting us to do this work, which can disrupt our ability to fit in socially at work?
Yeah, I really think it's a challenge because you have to sort of navigate that. How do I be part of everything, but also speak out against what's happening? So I think really leveraging behind the scenes conversations where you can, so that, you know, if you do feel that need to kind of protect yourself and protect your reputation in that way. And I would also say, like, these types of changes we're talking about, they happen over a very long period of time. Like, nothing is going to happen overnight. So take your time. Like, you don't have to speak out about every single thing that happens as it happens in the moment. Like, you can maybe take note of it and bring a few things together at one time. You can kind of navigate certain conversations, and it really, like, you want to build a reputation in your company of being a good employee and being someone to listen to in the first place. So really taking your time to get your roots in and really be a person of value, and then kind of, you know, there's some tact to this, I find, that, you know, trying to enter into these conversations strategically. And further, I would just say that, you know, I think the reason probably all three of us started our organizations is because we passionately felt that there was a gap and something missing. So if you care enough about it and you want to take on that, you know, that extra work, like, be that person. It's also totally okay to do that. And if your organization today doesn't respect it, then someone else will somewhere else.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Vanessa. And I think for me, one thing that helped was just really identifying people in the organization that would listen, that would be passionate about it, maybe behind closed doors. But then this helped me kind of also anticipate some of the discussions that may come about just as I progress with my initiative. And I think also sometimes you won't find those champions internally. So I think also focusing on finding them externally or through different organizations. And I think over time, I think some of the mentees that I've had, they stick it out and they hope that things will change. But as time progresses, I think you have to set a timeline. And if things aren't shifting in a positive way, I think it's time to also just look at other companies and find that culture fit.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm going to just jump to the next question just so we can get through these last two. What can we do to make those who are not facing these barriers feel more invested in advancing EDI? For example, does promoting the business case for EDI to leadership help in this regard?
I would say 100%. I think it has to start from the top. That's how the CEOs will actually be able to integrate that through the organization, and it has to come, like, you need the support from leadership. Otherwise, starting from the bottom and trying to push your way up, it's a very difficult process. So you do need that buy-in. That's guaranteed.
Thanks, Angela. Okay.
Yeah, I would.
Vanessa and Doina, are you okay if I jump to the next question, or do you have something pressing you want? Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
Yes, totally agree with Angela. Yes.
Oh, fabulous. Okay. So, do you have any examples of how your companies are benefiting from having diverse employees?
Oh,
I would say my company, we are tasked to do basically the impossible. It's like, make this crazy innovative toy for like $2. And it's, I think that having such diverse workforces in our engineering, our manufacturing, our marketing, it really just helps us. There's absolutely no way a homogenous group could come up with the solutions that we come up with. Like, you just absolutely need different perspectives to do something groundbreaking. And I think that that has translated to things like Paw Patrol, that are the global international #1 preschool brand. So there's, and related to that last question too, like, certain audiences sadly just care about money. So if you're able to bring forward that financial, economic incentive side of the conversation, that helps kind of leverage the why even more.
I think I know for Microsoft, even though I'm pretty new, but there is such a big focus on that inclusive design piece, and everything they do from like day one, they make sure to have everybody at the table, especially people with disabilities, because it's obviously depending on your restrictions. Sometimes you're not able to even get on these virtual calls or whatever it is. So they really integrate that into like from the onset. And I think that is key to have those diverse conversations.
For us at Revolution, we have young women we have a youth committee, but this youth committee is formed of women that are students. Some of them are past students from our programs. So when I say students, they are post-secondary, and they are included at the table, and they sit on our board meetings. So they're part of the conversation internally, and we want to hear what they have to say. And I feel, for me, because we hear so much about we don't have enough women for boards, because I think as being on a board, this is where you can really change, like shift the direction of the conversation where you need it to go, is I don't want to hear in the next 5 years that you don't have enough women at the board with board experience, because these women that are still in post-secondary, they get that training while they sit on our board as youth committee board members, and that's the kind of where it starts. And just be more like that, to have that inclusive, to have that voice. It's crucial to how we create programs and who is included in the programs and what does the conversation look like, and what is the outcome of everything that we do.
Okay, amazing. Now I'm going to end with one question, and I'm wondering if you can just sort of encapsulate your thoughts in a short response before we end this panel. If you could reimagine your STEM industry to be more equitable, diverse, and inclusive, what would it look like or be like?
I think
Toys would never be pink or blue ever again. That's the fantasy for my toy industry.
I think it's just feeling included. I think for me, like not having to have these conversations anymore, and just everyone being positive. I think that would be a success.
And for me, I like to see that women have options. Women from all backgrounds, they have the option. I'm not saying that they have to get into STEM, but this is an option that they could take on if they choose to.
Oh, wow. Okay, so on behalf of everybody who's here listening this morning, I want to thank each of you, Vanessa, Doina, and Angela, for sharing your insight, for speaking from the heart, for sharing your passion. You're all very inspiring, and thank you for giving opportunity to others in this area. Honestly, I could keep going with this panel all morning. I wish I could hear even more and more from you. But I will thank you from the bottom of my heart on behalf of everybody. Thank you so much.
Thanks.